pass to its third reading.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, a couple of observations about the substitute and the bill itself. First, I noted that prior to the substitute, the bill did some additional things, one of which was took away the jurisdiction for the Attorney General's office to enforce any of these things. So I think now we have the actual answer to why the Attorney General early in his term fired all the attorneys in the Office of Civil Rights. And we had heard that it was mostly because he wanted to replace it with his own people. But if you actually read the underlying bill that was here before, we'd find that they wouldn't have anything to do had the original bill passed. I want to make that point. I want to talk about this, the gentleman from Pennsylvania's description of the bill. He talks to some of the new protected classes that we added to the Virginia Values Act last year. But then the language that he added isn't limited to discrimination against those new protected classes, right? It says nothing in this chapter should prohibit a religious organization from doing whatever it thinks it needs to do that's calculated to promote its religious principles for which it was established or maintained. So this would allow discrimination on the basis of race if that was the purpose or that was one of the tenets of your religious belief. So if you had a person start a church in their basement, for instance, and one of the founding principles of their church was that God had scattered people of different races on the different continents because that was his plan to keep them separate and apart, and therefore interracial marriages were against their religious principles, they'd be free to discriminate against interracial couples under this statute, Mr. Speaker. So this goes far beyond. Now, of course, they really couldn't do that because federal law prohibits that kind of discrimination, right? So we have some protection from that activity under federal law, but this would prohibit the state from enforcing it, and it creates a confusing situation where we have a state law that purports to allow them to discriminate against these protected classes, which federal law prohibits. So for that reason, if no other, we should vote no to engross this bill. The employment piece of it is interesting as well. I am a person who attends synagogue regularly. Although I don't keep kosher, we have a kosher kitchen at the synagogue. So our kitchen staff do have to prepare kosher food, but we don't ask them to keep kosher in order to work there, right? That's not how it works. You can hire anybody to come work in the kitchen. It doesn't matter if they have the same dietary laws that you do or not. It doesn't matter if they're married to people you think they should be married to or not. It doesn't matter if they express themselves as the gender identity that you think is God's will or not. So this goes far too far in allowing that kind of discrimination. It allows discrimination on all sorts of bases, which we thought, I know that the delegate from Virginia Beach told us the other day that discrimination is over and doesn't happen anymore. I don't think that's the case. I hope it'll be the will of the body to defeat this bill. Let's not engross it. Let's kill it right here tonight and not send it to its third reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Pennsylvania, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from Fairfax yield for a question?
Will the delegate yield?
I'll yield.
The delegate yields.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman if he is aware that the language that he objects to in the construction section is lifted from a similar statute in New York State. And if not, would that knowledge change his position on the bill?
Mr. Speaker, I would answer the delegate that I'm well aware that this was negotiated to be the New York State model and that somehow was supposed to convince some of us on this side that it was okay. So yes, I'm familiar with the fact that it was lifted from the New York statute, and no, it does not change my mind, not in the least. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.